So I'm Katie Vernoy. I am your president-elect, and I have also been a chapter member, chapter president for Long Beach South Bay CAMFT. I also have been a sponsor for a chapter. I've also, through my businesses, got sponsors. And so I was voluntold that I would be doing this talk with the amazing Simple Practice. And so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Howard Spector. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Simple Practice. Some of you might know me. I created Track Your Hours. Some of you use that or know about it. And that's me.
Hi, I'm Charlene Kurth. I've been with Simple Practice about a year and a half, and I manage all of the partnerships. So I work with different camp chapters to do sponsorships and partnerships and figure out how we can support you and your members.
So we thought it would be an interesting take to talk about sponsors and actually have sponsors here to say what it's like and what they would want from chapters. And so I'm going to start off and talk about why would you even want to consider sponsorship. And then I think what probably makes sense is for those of you who already have sponsorship programs, maybe letting us know a little bit about the types of sponsorships that you've done. We'll do that quickly. And then we'll talk about kind of a new way to look into sponsorship, because I think there's ways that can feel kind of yucky, like a necessary evil, and ways that can feel really amazing that help your chapter to grow. And so when we look at the best of sponsorship, I think finding a way to support your chapter members in a lot of different paths can be very helpful. So obviously there's usually a financial aspect to it. So oftentimes that means that you can lower chapter dues. You can have people come to events and not pay $40 bazillion to attend, right? There's also opportunities to grow your community. When you have, local treatment centers, or you have local partners that want to come and support your chapter, you're also growing your community and connecting. And so I think sponsorship to me seems like a no-brainer, but I know a lot of therapists feel very uncomfortable asking for sponsorship. It feels awkward to ask for money. It feels awkward to bring folks who are not therapists necessarily into the fold in your chapter. And so I really strongly encourage you, if you haven't already, to consider adding sponsorship as part of the way that you help your chapter. So I'm going to throw it out to all of you guys. Who all is doing sponsorships already? Okay, so who wants to let's start here and go around the room. What are you doing for sponsorship?
So I'm the sponsorship chair, and really just reaching out to different organizations. I've kind of tried to think out of the box a little bit, talking to schools and my own personal business that I'm working with, my daytime job, to kind of connect those dots, reaching out to organizations that have multiple programs even, because what I'm noticing is that even though it may be one organization, for instance, ours has 18 programs, and each of those programs could benefit CAMFT and members alike. So really just trying to build those relationships and connect the community.
And I think the key word I heard there was creating relationships, which therapists are amazing at doing. So I love that. That's a really good way to approach it. Okay, who raised their hand up there? Okay, what are you doing for your sponsorship?
We're Ventura County chapter, and we put that role under our past president because we figured that person would be very experienced in explaining the chapter and the business and all that we have to offer. And we have put together basically 4 options of different kinds of sponsorship, in terms of sponsoring a whole meeting to just sponsoring perhaps centerpieces or part of an event or whatever it is. And that involves whether we send out emails, they have their own table, how they can display their marketing stuff. And we do hold a pre-license forum, which often we will have between 14 and 18 agencies, and they often will want to sponsor, and that's kind of like our go-to place in terms of looking at having treatment centers attend. And then we have more like individual practitioners who may not want to pay that higher fee because they're in private practice, but to sponsor a centerpiece. The centerpiece is for all the tables at one meeting. where they can leave their card and their business cards and their materials around works very well.
So the thing I like about that is it sounds like there's a lot of different options at a lot of different price points, and you've thought about how these different types of partners would be able to engage
Yes.
in supporting the chapter. I
Yes.
like that. How about over here?
This last year, Central San Joaquin Valley chapter, we had an open couch where we would actually have a large room at our facility that we utilize, and we had various resources within that opportunity for not only our chapter members to come in and get new resources, but also non-chapter members to come to know us as well. And it provided an opportunity that we could actually build new membership as well as getting some revenue coming in that was not from our membership dues.
So there's non-dues revenue, which was one of the answers in the Jeopardy game earlier, the Jeopardy game. But also you created a new idea that is something that we've also thought about in preparing for this presentation is sometimes it's not about getting money into the chapter, it's getting members into the chapter, and sometimes sponsors can help with that. So that's brilliant. Great idea. Did you guys, either of you? Okay. So now I'm going to turn it over to Simple Practice, and they can let us know why sponsors consider becoming sponsors of chapters.
She's way more eloquent at this than I am. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just was thrown off by the question. Okay, so why sponsors?
Why would you
want-
consider sponsoring a chapter?
Yeah, well, so I mean, specifically talking on behalf of Simple Practice, you know, we are. I think, well, in general, I'm going to change the question.
You can change, do what you want.
'Cause I have a different. Well, I guess it's more about thinking about that. Even that question is probably the most important thing that you guys should consider when you go to reach out to sponsors. Like, why is that organization or company or agency wanting to work with you in the first place? So for Simple Practice, there are a couple of things. One is, you know, obviously from the business side of it, we are a company that looks to work with clinicians to use our product. So we always want to get the name of our product out there. On the other side of it, working for Howard over the last year and a half has been really great. It's really cool to actually have that genuine desire to support the clinicians that we're working. So I know that we're not trying to get people to use our product because we want to sell it. That's part of it. But we're also trying to get them to use it because we know that it's going to help them. So actually trying to support the members of your organization. So when we want to work with an organization, we don't want to just be a sales team. We want to figure out ways that we can engage with the members, where we can provide resources, where we can explain to them the value of using this platform in a way that feels really genuine and connected, so that both the members feel like they're being supported and they have resources, and the company is getting the benefit of obviously explaining what our platform does. So I think that's why I wanted to change it a little bit. It was just talking about like that question is probably the key thing that everyone needs to think about, is like what is the agency or the school, or what is everyone trying to get out of it, so that you guys can find where you align and find opportunities to work together where it makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very well said. Also, you know, we were talking earlier. I hate when people try to sell me something. I start to sweat. I get really uncomfortable. I don't like it. So I've always felt like with Simple Practice, or even with Track Your Hours when I started working with the chapters, I never wanted to sell. You know, I felt like, well, a couple things. One is I've always wanted to support CAMPT and support the chapters. And as a business person, and I know that the chapters want to make money because, again, you can use that to, like Katie was saying, you can offset costs. I have a special place in my heart for people that are pre-licensed, that don't have a lot of money, so you can provide money for pre-licensed folks to get memberships into the chapters. There's so many things that money can do to help a chapter do different things. And so for me, it was less about selling Simple Practice. It was more about supporting the chapters, providing information about running your practice, about information about using practice management software. And I've gotten up and spoken at many chapters when I get my little 90 seconds to do a spiel about Simple Practice. I would say, look, I'm a resource for you. I want to help you understand if practice management software is right for you. And I know a lot about different ones. I can help you find the right one. I'm not trying to sell mine. I'm trying to help the profession. I'm trying to help people understand what tools and resources are available to them so they can run their businesses better, their practices better, because that really is the overall mission of my company. It's, yeah, we make software, but I wanted to build software for me because I was going to go into practice, but also it's about helping clinicians become better business people. That's really the mission of my company. And so how can we like bring that to the chapters, help the people at the chapter level understand, like, look, you've got all these great tools, HIPAA compliant systems, blah, 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 to run your practice. So for me, it was really about establishing a relationship with the chapters. It wasn't, and I didn't want it to be a transactional relationship, like, here's money, give me I get a table and I get to say something for 90 seconds, and then, then no one wants to talk with me because I think I'm trying to sell them something, and then I'm going to feel bad. I'm not going to want to come back. As chapters, my thinking is that you want sponsors that come back regularly and want to keep working with you, so you don't have to keep going out and trying to sell, trying to find money, right? So to me, it's about that relationship and really making sure that you're aligned on what everyone's trying to do. So that's really always been the approach that we've taken. How do we support the chapters and doing the things that you guys are doing, because it's amazing, and I know you're all really busy running your own practices, and then volunteering at the chapter level. I totally get it. So how can we find a place to have a relationship where we're getting in front of clinicians that could use our product. We're not doing a direct sell, we're doing an indirect sell, which is like, look, let me give you information about this or that about your running your practice. And it happens to be from Simple Practice, so you'll have an association there.
And I think the big thing that I've found in being on the chapter end is that not all sponsors think that way. And not all sponsors are as creative as Howard and Charlene are. I mean, they're super creative, and so I love talking with them. But I think oftentimes when you're thinking about sponsorship, I mentioned Necessary Evil before, I've seen too often that the sponsor is kind of this person that's sitting on the side and people are trying to avert their eyes and like, okay, they're there, but it's really like, okay, they're paying the bill, so we have to have them here, versus creating these relationships where there's this mutual benefit. And I think the reason that we're talking about this, the most important part of this, is creating a win-win-win. So a win for the chapter, a win for the chapter members, and a win for your sponsor. And I think that's, if you're thinking in that way, you get more creative. But in truth, a win for the chapter could be money, right? Because then you can keep running, you've got all this stuff. But if your chapter members feel like they're getting 27,000 emails from a sponsor and they feel like they're constantly being sold to, that's not a win for them, right? And if the sponsor feels like they're being hidden in the background and being used for their money, they feel kind of dirty, which isn't good. And so being able to identify, what do my members need? What do they want? What's going to benefit the chapter? And how do we actually make the sponsors feel good so they keep coming back? Because I think that's the hard part. That's the thing where if it becomes very transactional, give me money and this is what you get, then it isn't collaborative. It doesn't continue the relationship. And so I think stepping back into what is sponsorship, I think the difficulty of thinking about sponsorship is that we have a lot of models that work okay. And oftentimes, if you're doing a big event, you want to have your 4 levels, you want to have this stuff so that that people know what they get, right? You want to make sure that they actually understand what that is. However, when you're starting to really dig in deeper and creating a more creative relationship, a collaborative relationship with someone, you can step back from that and start thinking creatively. And so we're going to get to that, but I just wanted to frame what we're talking about with this idea that sponsorship can be almost anything that you want it to be. It can be having a room from a sponsor so that you have free meetings, and they can get up and say something, or they can just be present, they can explain their resources. It can be a lot of things, and so thinking creatively, kind of get your juices flowing. We'll be doing some brainstorming at the end. I think that's really important. But this concept of win-win-win, I think, is super important. If somebody's not winning, then it's going to hurt the chapter in some way. The sponsor won't come back. Members will start leaving because they feel like they're constantly being sold to. Or if you're not actually bringing in sponsorship money on a consistent basis, then your budget is not going to work out properly. So. Okay, so how do you get started? So what is the first thing that you think you should do in starting to look at sponsors? What do you guys think? Just start ideas.
Ask your why.
Ask your why. I like it. What else?
Do they match? Do they offer something that we actually need.
Okay. Yes. Other question. What other things that you think you should think about?
Previous relationships. Our chapter goes through and looks at different sponsors' views in the past that we have relationships with, and making sure we're keeping those going.
Great. So one thing we didn't talk about is kind of the strategy. Well, you talked about it, so I'll give you credit for that. But you have to figure out why are you doing, but also what are your goals? What can the sponsors help with? And so this can be kind of the big questions of, do you need more members? Do you need money? Do you need more resources? Do you need a location? Do you need a website? Like, what are the things that you need help with? Find out what your goals are and actually set them in place. Do you get, I feel like I'm taking over. Charlene has ideas on this.
Is there a question?
I'll give you a question. Let me think of the question.
Well, go ahead.
I was just also going to say something, just addressing the transactional piece also. So I talked about how it's very important for us to have, we've sponsored events where we knew the chapter just needed money to do something, and we weren't going to get anything out of it, but we had a relationship that was built, so we're happy to do that to support them. That doesn't happen all the time. And there are people that do want that transactional piece. Like, I'm going to give you money and I really want to get something out of it. So when that happens, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, that's just business, that's life, right? But I would say that when people are giving money, a lot of times they really want to know what they're going to get out of it. And so you have to be able to track things like, if you have an email list, is someone on your team being able to give data, like, we had this many opens, we had this many clicks, we had this many conversions, whatever. You've got to have data. People have asked us before, like, oh, we're going to do an event, we want $1,000. And we're like, okay, well, tell me more. And they're like, well, we've got 15 people who are going to show up, and send us your logo, we'll put it on an email and send it out once. And we're like, well, in the past I said, okay, and we've done it, and the logo is all elongated and it doesn't look right. It's at the bottom of an email, and it's just like, you have to think about, if you want to get, you got to give, right?
Yeah.
So if it is a really transactional piece, just make sure you've got data and information to give folks, so they feel like, oh wow, this is what I got for the money. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yes.
And not make transactions a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just how you do it. Did you want to say something else?
No, I'm good.
Are you sure?
Okay.
Sorry.
So Howard transitioned very nicely from goal setting to what do you bring to the table.
Okay, we got goal setting.
Well, I think just to kind of refine goal setting is, I think it's important to understand, if it is an event, more of a transactional kind of thing, if it is a specific event, part of the goal setting is actually knowing how much money you need to raise. And then the other side of it is, how much can you actually ask from sponsors? Because if you've got a huge event, extremely expensive, and you've got 20 people there, that's very different, and sponsors are going to have a very different perception of that than if you have 300 people there. And so I think being able to identify the specific goals, whether they're financial or whatever, and really having that clear in your head before you go out to seek sponsorships. There's a lot of times I see chapters that just say, well, every other chapter I've seen, they ask for $500. So I'm going to ask for $500, and that can work. But you may have more to offer, and you could potentially ask for $5,000 if you have a gigantic chapter that's very engaged. And so you don't want to undersell, but you also don't want to be constantly getting no's, because you're like, well, we're a small chapter where there's 20 of us. We're all really engaged, but we're all in private practice, and I know that you're an agency. It's like, you have to align it. So I think it's really getting clear on both what the goals are, but then also who are you and what do you bring to the table. And I really liked what Howard was saying. I think knowing what you can actually offer to sponsors is really important. Being able to look at, do I have engaged membership? What are they engaged to do? Can I get them to come to meetings? Then sponsor meetings. Can I get them to come out to special events in the community? Then figure out what lines up there. It can be, do I have a lot of pre-licensed members? And it's interesting because Howard, and I'll get this to you, if Howard would, as Track Your Hours, would want a whole bunch of pre-licensed members, but now as Simple Practice wants licensed members. And so being able to know who is there and who's going to show up, and even what type of an event. If you're going to do a law and ethics for clinical supervision, you don't necessarily want Track Your Hours there, right? But you probably would want Simple Practice there if it was for clinical supervision and private practice. So I'll pass this along to Charlene.
So we moved a little bit further along, but the other thing about it's about the transactional and all of that stuff. I know that it seems like a lot of the sponsorships are always around one particular event, and so in my mind, it's not so much that it's like, oh, it's not transactional or it's only relationship, but it's this moving away from the idea that it has to be a one-to-one transaction. We have this one event, and so we need a sponsor for this particular thing where we might only have 20 people, so we can only ask for so much. Because a lot of times we're happy to support an event, so we'll say, here you go, whatever you guys need for the event. But it's maybe an event to appreciate your members, and it doesn't feel right to have a booth there because people are not going to buy practice management. So, you know what? Enjoy your event, and then we can find other opportunities to engage. And so in our case, we might say, maybe we can host a workshop for you where we provide resources. So now you're getting additional value for your members because you get a workshop, you get some resources, and then we get a platform or forum that makes more sense for us to engage at that time. So I think it's beyond just the transactional of like making it feel too businessy, but it's like, it doesn't always have to be like in that same thing, like one-to-one. So thinking beyond like longer term or partnerships, or say, maybe we do something over 3 months and we do some kind of marketing. So I think that's why, to me, the goals are so important, because if you think about all of the different things that you guys are trying to accomplish, we might be able to support you in revenue goals and support you in resources or other events completely separate times and still get what we need out of it as a company and participating.
Okay, so what do you guys think about this idea of having kind of these longer term relationships with sponsors?
I think it's necessary, and I think it even goes even bigger into understanding what your vision is. Because if you have a vision for what you want for your chapter, which also speaks to your community, right? Because we're all in different communities, so you have to understand what your vision is for your community, and then that way, when you're building these sponsorship relationships, it's not just a one-time thing. This is something that's going to continue on and hopefully expand because of the relationships that we have built, not just between us and our members, but now we're bringing in the community aspect as well. A sponsor can be very great for our other individuals who are part of CAMP or not part of CAMP, but we really want to dig deeper into how we're supporting the rest of our environment, how are we supporting the rest of our community, a domino effect. We help a therapist up here who then helps all of these individuals in the community. So looking at it from that bigger perspective as well.
So I think you just made it a win-win-win-win.
So I think that's an important point, is like the other thing that sponsors can do, or partners, they can help you identify other ways, like other people that you can work with. So if you start a conversation, you're reaching out for a sponsorship, if you don't immediately or say what your goals are for the organization, that sponsor should be asking, and that's a sign of a good sponsor. They should say, what are you guys trying to accomplish? Like, what is your mission? Because then we can say, here's the very direct way we can help, but also we've worked with this organization or that person who can help you do some kind of event. So I think the more you guys can start your conversations about why are you looking for this, what are you trying to accomplish, beyond just like, I want the $1,000 for this event, what are you trying to do as an organization? And then you should also ask that same question of the sponsor. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish?
I think it's important because most therapists, a lot of therapists in private practice are out there lone wolfing it, and they may not, I didn't know anything about, like I found Simple Practice just looking online. I didn't even think that there was something like that out there for someone in private practice. I thought it was just medical records were for organizations or DMH or whatever. And so just having sponsorships sounds like a great idea to allow clinicians who are out by themselves to know what the resources are in the community. And I'm really glad, I'm almost at the end of my trial for Simple Practice, and I'm really glad to see that you're a real person. Because when I saw the picture, I thought you were just like the front guy and no one knows who this person is. So thank you for being here. Yeah.
No problem. I mean, thank you for trying Simple Practice. Hope you like it. Yeah, I mean, look, I've been working with CAMP since 2007 when I started Track Your Hours, and I feel very, like, I was a member of CAMP. I called David Jensen a bunch of times to get legal information. It's like, I get it. So I feel very connected to this community and really grateful to be able to help support it in some way. So we're not here to sell Simple Practice. We're here to just offer our experiences. But what was I going to say? I totally had something to say before, and I forgot. I'm going to come back to me. Goals alignment. Just another example. Like we work with a lot of people, like Charlene was saying, and like I don't know how many of you know Barbara Griswold. She does a lot of stuff around insurance, and we connected with her a long time ago. And we've even like been able to go to chapters and say, look, we're going to pay for Barbara to come up, to fly up, to come and give a great presentation on insurance for you, and it's not going to cost you anything. We'll just sponsor it. We'll have a presence there, and it'll be sponsored by us. But that's a great thing. So we can get really creative and try to figure out what to do. It's not always the same thing. Like, give us some money, come get a booth. We're all, and you'll say your spiel. There's a lot of different things we can do. We want to do those things. It's exciting to us. We love it. We have a great new office where we're going to host events for chapters there. We're going to have people come in, offer CEUs, stuff like that. So there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot that other companies can do. It's not just us, can do with you as well. But it's like, just get really creative and think about it. And like Charlene was saying, collaborate with the partners. I like to say partners instead of sponsors, because I feel like we're a partner. We work with Estelle a ton, LA Camped. I feel like we're partners, right? Yeah. So that's a great thing. And so we're constantly going back to LA Camp and working together. We love it, and it isn't always about us signing more people up, whatever. And that's totally cool. And we learn along the way what works, what doesn't. It's a collaboration. So the more companies or whatever you can find that are willing to have that, the better and the easier it is. You feel like you're all working together to do the same thing.
Sorry, one more thing about that. So the other thing is, I'm assuming everyone here is like the chapter leaders, right? So you've got to convince your members of why you're working with an organization, so it doesn't feel like they have to talk to those people for the event. We always try and look for ways, and you should do this with any sponsor or partner. You look for a particular goal or a particular thing that your members are really interested in that aligns with that particular company or educational program, whatever it is, and you find a way to talk about that at the right time. So you bring in those resources when it makes sense. So you're not just having some completely unrelated event. So you're having something about law and ethics, and then you say, oh, and here's practice management, but half of the people there are maybe not in private practice, so it's not the right time. Whereas if you have some kind of event that's specific around building a better private practice, now it makes total sense to have Simple Practice there. It doesn't feel like it's a sales pitch for some random thing. And so I think that's the important thing, is you try and find activities that actually makes sense, so it looks like you're collaborating. It doesn't look like it is. You're collaborating, you're finding those times to provide the resources and not just a sales pitch, because your members aren't going to really enjoy the sales pitch, and then the sponsors or partners don't really get too much out of it. So I think that's where we've been most successful, is when we can provide resources. If we see, an example came up, we saw someone wrote an article about telehealth and was like, wow, we offer telehealth, and forget the fact that we offer telehealth, we've got these really great resources. We've got a webinar on how to bill for telehealth. Why don't we share this with the members? And so we get our name out there, and we can support the members, and it's a conversation they're already having. So just looking for anything that your members are interested in, go and find an organization or a program or a company that offers that and can provide more resources, and then it feels more genuine.
Yeah, great point. I would also say at one point, it's great to be really transparent with your members also. Like, look, we're going to go get these sponsors, to generate revenue to do these particular things, because you always get these people that are totally jaded about, you've got this company here, they're trying to sell us something, and it's like, people should understand what you're trying to do, what the mission is behind it. Be really transparent. Look, this company is going to help. This revenue from these things is going to help us. Again, sponsor pre-licensed folks, pay for their memberships, do whatever. If people understand really what is behind it all, they're much more accepting of it. And again, it's like I've been to a lot of events, I had been in the past, where I felt really shitty for being there, because I felt like I was this person that no one wanted to talk to, because they saw me as this person selling to them, and I was standing at this table the whole time feeling horrible. And it's like, you don't want to do that. You want to basically make sure that everyone's aligned, and everyone knows why that person is there and what's going on. And the more aligned it can be with a particular topic, the better.
And I think that's the alignment, I think, is critical, because you can probably find a shady treatment center that has patient brokers that would love to come talk to your chapter, especially if you've got 300 therapists sitting there, and they'll pay you tons of money, but it's not aligned. And that's more of an extreme example. But if you don't find companies that you wouldn't want to actually spend time with, maybe they shouldn't sponsor. If you don't want them to hang out with your members, maybe they shouldn't sponsor. And so I think it's figuring out, and I really liked what you were saying about what does your community need, whether it's the community in which you live, your community of CAMPT members. I think, what do they need? What would be helpful? How can we do something together so it feels like we're collaborating, and even having some of those conversations around a table saying, hey, we want to do this thing for our community. Hey, partners, sponsors, what do you think? You know, we've noticed you have a location, you have some resources, and you have this or the other thing. Let's all come together and create a wonderful event or a wonderful service for our community. And I think it helps to do things. And I appreciate being very transparent. I think that there are going to be chapter members that hate the fact that we have to have sponsors regardless. Because I think therapists hate talking about money, they hate thinking about money, and most people.
That's a whole other topic.
Yes, well, and I think the biggest piece is that unless you've actually been part of the event planning or some of this, put some of that stuff together, people will say this is too expensive, and you're like, oh, we brought it down so much because we were able to get a sponsor, but like we are still bleeding money. Because we've got this gorgeous place and a hot breakfast, stop complaining. But you don't say that to them because, they're members. But I think it's that piece of, some people are just going to never get it till they're in your seats, right? So you want to be transparent, but I think it's a lot easier to be totally transparent when it's people you want to hang out with, people who are going to enrich your organization in some way. And so I think being able to identify who aligns, who would you actually want to refer clients to, would you actually want to receive clients from, who is going to be the resources. So whether it's schools or hospitals or treatment centers or any of the different places that you're already collaborating with, who do you actually want in your community, and have them sponsor. So going to the next stage is, how do you approach them? Because that's the part I think that's really hard for therapists, is approaching sponsors. And so my strategy is always coming in with curiosity. Does that feel doable? And I think if you're like cold calling people or sending out emails, you're going to get a lot of no's. And so don't despair. But the stronger way to do this, and I was told to speak on this since I'm the one usually approaching sponsors, but if you can actually get a warm introduction, and I think somebody over here was talking about like who do your members know, who have you already had relationships with, being able to go to someone and especially those folks who are coming to your chapter meeting because they want to meet therapists, the treatment placement specialist, the envoy from the school, the new app that's coming down the road. Or an accounting firm. Sometimes CPAs will come, sometimes they won't. They won't be right now because they're all deep in tax season. But, there's mediators and family law attorneys. There's a lot of people that find their way to your chapter meeting. And so introduce yourself. That could be a referral source for you individually, but you can also start talking about, and this is something where, I liked what DJ was saying, is like, how would you like to be involved? What would you like to gain from being here today? What's going on, that kind of stuff. Can we have a coffee? You can even, you can really slow roll it if you want, but you can also say, hey, we have a lot of different opportunities to support the chapter. Have you considered that? And they'd be like, yes. The reason I started doing sponsorship, because I understood that the people that were sitting in the audience, like on their phones because they were there to meet people and not to learn the education, I would go up to them and say, you want to sponsor? And they say yes. That was the whole conversation. Now, granted, there was other times that I was talking to them, but I recognize they're there because they want to get in front of these people. And so if you give them a mechanism to get in front of the people, they'll say yes. So those are the really easy ones. And I think, and especially if it's a kind of a welcome, like, hey, you know, a couple $100, you know, whatever, those are really simple. And that can be kind of the entry level. But I think the more you can kind of reach out and say, we have this need. We need these types of resources. We see that you have these types of resources. Would you like to collaborate with us? That's step one. Step two. Hey, we're having this gigantic event with a really famous speaker. We're probably going to have at least 100 people there. We're wanting some bigger sponsors that can help us really put on a really nice event. Would you be interested? And if they say, well, I don't know, you can say, well, what are the goals that you have for your company and connecting with therapists? Because that's what I spend most of my time when I'm talking sponsorship saying, okay, we know we like each other. Can we find something that would be helpful for both of us? You know, what are your goals? What are the things? So if their goals are to specifically meet people, come to our event, get a table, interact. If it's, well, we really want to share this resource and have, you know, this conversation more online, we don't really have the manpower to send somebody, tell them you'll do a solo mailer, you know, which is an email with one topic for those that don't know. So really coming from a place of, hey, I've got something to offer you. I really like what you're doing and I'd like to collaborate. So what are some ways that people have been successful in approaching sponsors? Because I know there's people out here that do a really good job. So Estelle, how do you approach sponsors?
Well, there's a number of different ways. First of all, I want to say your whole board has to be have the radar up for sponsors. If you have an event or if they get an email from somebody who's promoting themselves, they can pass that information on to you. And then you can refer to that. So that's kind of a warm, like what you were talking about, a warm intro, so it's not just a cold thing. I've written a lot of cold emails, and I try to be as warm and inviting as possible. I try to give a lot of information, and I would say over 50% of them never respond, which is fine. And then every once in a while, somebody does respond. It sounds like what you're doing is really great. We're not in a position right now. Keep us on your, on your list. So I think one approach is not necessarily what you do, but you just kind of zoom out and try to figure out a number of different ways, and don't rely heavily on any one way, but just be very versatile and flexible and and creative in thinking, what's another way I could do this, Our last sponsor at our January event was Immigration Law Offices of Los Angeles. Now, I stumbled on them one time. We were having somebody who was giving a presentation on, working with diverse populations. And I thought, maybe a law firm that, works with diverse populations would be a good fit for this event. And I called this sponsor, and at the time I entered into a wonderful conversation with him. We were on the phone for 10 or 15 minutes, and he said, yeah, I want to sponsor. And then he ghosted me, and I never heard from him again. Okay, And then a year later, he writes me. He said, I'm still interested in sponsoring. Where did that come from? So you just never know if you sprinkle the seeds around, which ones are going to germinate and which ones won't. So, and I think the most important thing is to feel supported in your community, with your board, with your community, and just to keep plodding ahead and not get discouraged by the people who don't respond to you, and just keep having faith that for every 5 emails that you send out, maybe one will respond to you, and that's good enough.
And that email may be no. So I want to comment on that because I think oftentimes chapters will turn over. And so one thing to really consider is, yes, all of your chapter board, especially board members are responsible to help try to find sponsors, but there needs to be a mechanism to communicate in kind of a central hub so that you continue to nurture the sponsors all the way through and to be able to respond. Sometimes it's even logistically having a specific email that the sponsorship chair has so that so you have that responses, so you don't lose the relationships every time, the board turns over.
Right. Yeah, we're using like a CRM,
Customer relationship management system.
Yeah, so something to keep track of it. That way, when someone leaves, you still have a list of everybody. One other thing, and then I get to you. So there's
And we had someone here.
Okay, there's a great software, a book for software development called Don't Make Me Think, or for developing websites. And what that means is, like, when you go to a website, when you go to a web page, if it's really well designed, then you don't have to think. You know exactly what to do. You know where to click. You know what's going on. So I think about that a lot. Even though it says don't make me think, I do think about that a lot. So anyway, that's another conversation. But I would say that the more information you can have for someone where they don't have to think about it. If you call them up and say, XYZ at this chapter, we have this many members, this is what we do. It's like the more information that you can give so they can make a really great, decision quickly without having to think about it too much or ask too many questions, the better. So I would say put together like a sheet or whatever it is that you have that basically says things like, these are our members, this is like maybe the demographic information, all sorts of things on there so they have all the information that they need to make the decision. That would be really helpful, I think.
And so I don't know if we put all the information, but some of the information that I think is most appealing is, how many people are on your mailing list? What are the open rates? So you have to have some way to track that. And so I don't know if Wild Apricot has that or not, but I know that most CRMs do, most email systems do. How many members attend meetings, like just kind of who's engaged and who they are. I know we mentioned that before, but I think email list and open rates are things that I think most chapters don't necessarily pay attention to, but that could be a really big selling point. You had a way that you approached members. Somebody up front, and then you'll be next.
I'm sorry.
No, I had a question.
Okay, question.
Someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked if he could come and speak to our chapter about virtual admin. And so I had a little conversation with him and set him up to come and speak at one of our meetings. And now I'm hearing that could have been a sponsorship type act. I never heard of sponsorship until today or until I got the agenda. So what could I do in the future if someone reaches out and says, I have this product or this service and I want to come and get in front of your chapter?
I think the biggest thing that you want to think about is kind of what the relationship is that you want to develop. And so if somebody says, I want to come and talk to you about my product, you really want to think about, is that something that you want to put in front of your members? But if it's, I want to talk about this general topic, and I also would like to introduce my services or product, then you can say, okay, well, we let's look at the content calendar, let's figure out what we're going to do, that kind of stuff. But having somebody come in as an expert and talk about their stuff is actually an entry-level way of saying, like, hey, come do this. And as long as they're not super salesy, as long as they actually have really juicy content for your members, you can call it sponsored content, or you can decide this is just really cool. And now the next time we have something, we've created this relationship and we can talk about, why don't we do some emails for you and really, advertise your special offer as a sponsorship. And so that you can then, step into that. I think that there's times when you want to make sure that you're charging people for stuff, and there's times when you want to really take the value that you're getting as it is. I don't know if I can say that better. I don't know. Does that make sense? Am I speaking correctly?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking. So that's kind of what we're getting as, you don't necessarily want every single thing to necessarily be like a monetary transaction. So that's why we kind of avoid the term sponsorship and think more about partnership, because there might be enough value in that person coming in that you've now, maybe it's some speaker that you can get that adds value to your existing members, but it also makes it more attractive for other members to join your organization. And then you can have a conversation with them and say, okay, well, what else could we do? Maybe there's something longer term. Maybe you can host a workshop and you can charge or figure it out that way. But you don't necessarily want every single thing to be like, if someone approaches you genuinely saying, I've got this really great resource I'd love to share, and it's not a sales pitch, you don't necessarily want to say, okay, well, if you give us $500, I'll give you an hour to talk to people. Because we offered to do workshops where we went in and we talked about practice management, and we didn't have to pay to do that. We actually just hosted the workshop, so we covered the cost of it. Or we're trying to launch CEs, so we said, hey, we're going to host a workshop for you guys. We didn't, and a lot of the chapters are communicating the fact that we're having this workshop. There's no charge to us, but we're hosting it. So we're handling the cost, so it's a benefit to your members in that way. So there might be other ways that you can do it without necessarily having to say, here's a contract. If you give us $500, you can speak.
Well, I already set this up, and so I'm thinking about how can because I don't, it feels like it might be something where someone's coming to peddle their wares, and in my experience, I didn't know that, this was not necessary. So how can I save my members from that? Like, would it be appropriate for me to ask him to put something together on a general topic that would be of interest to us, to educate, provide some kind of education for us, and then throw in his services?
I think Estelle has a response. My initial response, just really quickly, my initial response is I think if somebody's coming in to speak for your chapter that has asked to speak because they have that service, I think I would say we have a rule that we don't sell from the stage. And so if they then start selling from the stage, then they don't come back. But you can say, we understand that you have a service that could be very valuable to our members, and so we'd like to offer a sponsorship in this way so that potentially you can have that on the back end. But I think the resource of learning about kind of virtual assistant services, I think, is really important. So that'll all be valuable, but we really don't want you to pitch your services from the stage. Would you still like to come?
Okay.
What were you going to say, Estelle?
I think you can define the role. So you can say there are two ways. I mean, you could either come in as a sponsor or as a presenter. If you're a presenter, here are the guidelines within which we'd like to have you present.
Do you have some guidelines I could borrow? I mean,
Well, think about what you want.
Yeah.
And I would ask him, what are your goals? His goals in coming. Like, is he coming to promote himself, or is he coming to educate and inform and become a resource for your community?
So
and really discern those two things and make a clear distinction between them so that he commits to what he is actually going to do.
okay.
And then you're allowed to have a policy about that and say, this is our policy. As Katie said, you can't sell from the stage. So
you had an idea too. I want to make sure I get to your idea.
I wanted to, we see our chapter as a conduit between the mental health community in the county and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a way of members getting to know more of the mental health community, the mental health community getting to know the chapter and the members. So not only do we experience, as board members come and go, so then someone else now has to take on that role and get familiar with it and so on. But we find that in a lot of the treatment agencies, directors change positions like underwear. And it's like, so we often are having to go back and reinvent the wheel in the sense that, we've spent all this time, we've established this relationship, and we've got, unfortunately at times, both ends being new, but more times than not, the treatment center ends being more new than the board members. And that ends up, we feel like we waste a lot of time having to keep doing that. So I'm wondering what you would have to say to that. And that may be just the nature of...
Yeah, I have a thought, and you may have a thought too, I don't know, because Charlene is so organized. Everything in our company kind of goes through her, and it's amazing. But, I would say, one of the things I think about a lot when I think about these chapters is, like every chapter does it their own way. And there's got to be an opportunity to share best practices with one another. I don't know if you guys have any kind of communicate, like a forum or anything like that, but you just asked to borrow something from Estelle. Well, what if everyone could access those things? So that's one thing. There has to be better sharing of things. Like, if someone uses MailChimp versus Emma, like, what's the differentiator? Or, I know you use MailChimp, so I have a question. Let me reach out to you to ask you a question about it. You guys should all be using the same systems, because every chapter website looks totally different. There's different levels of professionalism. It's like, why is everyone doing something different? You guys should share more information and use similar systems. So that's one thing. But more specifically, I think that going back to this idea of a CRM or having things templatized. So if you have, if you know that every time you talk with a director, that director wants to know these particular things or this information, get that set up somewhere and store it somewhere. Use Google Docs or something with a great file system so everyone knows where everything is. And you can you know that, hey, there's a new director here. Cool. Let me just send this information out. I can write them a little letter, say, hey, we used to work with Director X. It was fantastic, blah, blah, blah. Here's the information that we had. Here's the things we did with you folks before. Let's schedule a time next Tuesday at 10, whatever, or if that doesn't work, suggest something different. Get on the phone with them. They have all the information. They know, and you know what you did before with them because you've got that all documented somewhere. A lot of this comes down to organization. So this whole idea of a CRM or some kind of tool to track things, so everyone knows who's talked to who. That way, when people on your staffs change, a different board comes in, they can it's seamless. It's got to be seamless because it can't be about the individual people. It's got to be about the role. So track all that stuff. Share information with each other.
Did you have something, or were you?
Okay.
One of the things that I definitely agree. As an associate, when I had my first practicum, my supervisor said, I need a resource manual. Your supervisor's not to this. I need you to work on this. I had 4 counties I had to go through and get everything I could. And no one wanted to share with me. And I'm sitting here going, why is our community doing this? Why are we saying, no, I'm not going to give you my resources. We're all out there for the same purpose. So why can't we share amongst ourselves? At the same time, the cross between fields, MFTs, MSWs, everything seems very convoluted at times. And especially in Central San Joaquin Valley, we have a lot of social workers that they go, I didn't know I could be part of your chapter. I didn't know you guys provided services for us. So I think it's also reaching out to our other fields and encouraging them to be part of this, and that way we have other resources that we can help and bring in, and more sponsors.
Yeah, that's great. That's great learning. For other people to understand. Like, look, you can reach out to MSWs, and here's how we did it.
Now, this just kind of reminds me of something more general. I won't say the specific person, but before the event, we were having lunch, and someone said, "I don't know if I'm going to go to sponsorship because I don't know if I want to focus just on business. I want to talk about other stuff." And it just caught my eye, it caught my attention because I think so often we try and separate business and relationship. And one of the things Howard says all the time about the company is we're good with a capital G. And I do believe that you can have companies and chapters and organizations and as individual therapists, it doesn't always have to feel so combative and so competitive. There's opportunity for everyone to succeed. So I think that that's an important thing to think about. This is just general, for therapists that we try and give advice around networking, that, networking and really sticking or saying what your specialty is not going to become competition. It allows you to find other people who might say, I focus on depression and this person focuses on couples, and I can actually refer over to them. So it's the same thing with the chapter, same things with the sponsors that you're working with. It doesn't have to be one sponsor versus another sponsor. We're all, hopefully working towards the same goals. And so I think just kind of shifting that mindset of business being very separate from relationships is really important, and hopefully what we're trying to get across today. And I think that's, when we do the things with members and sponsors and everything, just kind of thinking through relationships and how you can collaborate. And I think that also helps with what you're talking about, the turnover, is that if you establish a relationship with a sponsor, it's not transactional, and so it doesn't matter if that one person turns over. Other people in the organization will know those people. So I know Estelle, but I also know Jonathan, I know Billy, I know a lot of other people. When I go to the events, I talk to them. So if Estelle left, I feel that there are other people who would know Simple Practice, and it's the same way on the other end. When I came in and Howard was no longer managing sponsorships, he made it clear to me the importance of working with an organization because it was a relationship, and I took that on and I was able to establish that relationship right away. So I think the relationships and then also being very organized also helps tremendously. But if you make it more than just being that one-to-one person, then more people in the organization will know who you're working with, and you don't have to reestablish that every time because it's the organizations have a relationship, not just the individuals that you're working with.
And I would second that as far as when you're working with the organization to ask the question, because now you're forming that relationship of, and who else should I be in contact with, and who else above you should I be making network with, because I think that's where it really can benefit you in the long term.
Yeah, I think therapists, I mean, your jobs are all about relationships and about being
Yes.
curious and asking questions and understanding, seeing connections between things. There's no difference between that and like looking at another business and doing the same things. Like, how do these people work together? What do they do? What are the dynamics there? Who should I talk with? Who shouldn't I talk with? So it's all should come very natural to you folks. And also, going back to this whole thing, I feel like if every chapter is trying to figure this all out, you know, everyone's trying to figure the same thing out. Why don't you guys collaborate more and figure things out together? Or someone can say, hey, these are some great sponsors that we've worked with. You know, like Simple Practice, for example. It's like, I mean, I'm using that as an example. I'm just saying, okay, Therapy Notes. Okay, there, Therapy Notes, one of our competitors. Therapy Notes is a great sponsor. You know, so everyone can see like, oh wow, I'm going to call them because it seems like they've sponsored a lot of events for a number of chapters. I'm looking for a sponsor like that. I'm going to call them. So someone in your community should volunteer, or you guys should have a committee or do something where someone's like, okay, I'm going to keep track. I'll keep a database. It could be a Google sheet that everyone can have access to. They can see notes about, look, we used this sponsor. They sucked. Here's why. They didn't do this. They were late. You know, they sold from the stage, whatever. Or this one was fantastic. They did all these things. The people loved them. These are the notes. That's a no-brainer. It doesn't take a lot to do. You need people that are going to, you need someone like a directly responsible individual that is going to make sure that Estelle, have you filled it out? Have you filled it out? Is everyone keeping up and doing what they need to do? Because that's really easy then. You could go and start building a whole database of potential sponsors or documentation. This is what I send to new sponsors. This is what we do. And it's all there. You guys can all pull from it and everyone can start making more money and having more relationships and doing more things for your chapters.
I have two things to add to that. So one, that not just sharing the ideas of sponsors, but also collaborating for events. So maybe your chapter is a little bit smaller, and so you're not able to bring in a larger sponsor, but you can collaborate with a couple other chapters that are local, have an event together, and then now it becomes more intriguing to that company or organization, because now you can have 200 people there instead of 50 people. On the other side of the sharing the sponsors, you have to also think of it as like a sponsor's not going to say, oh no, I'm sorry, I've maxed out. I can only work with this one chapter. The sponsors want to get in front of the members. So if you guys have similar memberships, and I'll just use Simple Practice because I know Simple Practice. Like if you guys have a lot of private practice clinicians and another chapter has a lot of private practice clinicians, we're not going to say, oh no, we've already worked with this chapter, so we're done. We want to get in front of as many private practice clinicians as possible. So there's no harm in sharing. Maybe if it's a much smaller, more local thing, it doesn't make sense. But for some of these bigger organizations, you might actually have more opportunity to work with companies or programs that have a lot more resources to share if you guys like stick together and kind of pool those, or pool the membership, or pool the selection of sponsors that you can work with. So I think actually working together might be a better idea.
And I think that's something where there are going to be some local sponsors that really only have the resources to work with you. They might not have the budget. You know, there's also timing. Sometimes you meet with them in November, they have plenty of money, and you meet with them in December and they've already allocated all their sponsorship. So I think it's also important to recognize that when you're creating this database, that it can also be, when do you approach the sponsor? Because I think oftentimes if you don't have that kind of constant thing, and you don't have, and I think a CRM is a good way to do that, because then you can have like a reminder pop up. But if you can't afford a CRM for your chapter, put it on the get a Google, account for your chapter and put it on that calendar. And so it pops up that, these are the sponsors we talked to at the beginning of November. These are the sponsors we talked to in June, so that you're making sure that you're accessing folks at the right time. And some of this is logistics and kind of how to do things. What are the things that you guys, because I'm looking and I think, are we going till 2? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. We're never stopping.
We're never stopping. We'll just keep talking and then the audience will change over. But what are the types of things, because we can talk about, I think, any aspect, we can talk about what can go into a sponsorship package, how to evolve the relationship. I think we also want to talk about some best practices of the things that potentially people have done that sponsors aren't too pleased about. So what do you guys want to talk about right now?
Well, what question?
What questions do you have related to those
Can I also
things?
Just make a quick comment. A CRM, by the way, I mean, they make CRMs for $50 a month, like, base CRM or high rise. I mean, they're not expensive things to set up and use.
What is that acronym for?
What?
Customer relationship management system.
Basically, it's simple. Like, I send you an email through the CRM. It's got track that I sent you an email at this date. I can make note, or I call you. I can make notes. Like, I can say, we just had a call. Here are the notes from the call. And I can say like, on that call, you said, call me next week. I say, okay. So I click a button that sets a reminder for me to call you next week. Now I've tracked that I've called you. I've tracked the notes in the conversation. I've set it to basically remind me in a week to call you. So in a week, I'm going to get a notification to call you. I click a button. I call you. I make more notes. So it just allows you to track things. You can put documents in there. You can do a ton of different things in it. You can use it as much or as little as you want. But now you've got one central place where you're tracking all those communications that you have. So you can say, oh, did I call that sponsor? I can't remember. You look it up. You see, oh, yeah, we spoke with them. It was whatever. And you got all that data right there.
Does Simple Practice have that in there?
No.
Can you give me the name of a couple of those examples?
I think High Rise is one. I think I haven't used them on Base. We use something called Base CRM.
It's actually called Zendesk Cell now.
Oh, they bought it?
Yeah, Zendesk
Wow.
bought it.
That's great.
Zendesk Cell.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if you look up Base CRM, you should find it.
Yeah, and there's tons of them. And they're not, they're not that much money. I like to talk about cost versus investments. These aren't costs. These are investments, and it's not a lot of money. And you get a ton out of it if people use it. But you've got to find one person in the chapter that owns it, that is going to learn how to use it and be responsible for it. And when that person leaves, they need to train somebody else. So, you got to use these things. And it's easy to get them and not use them because it can be overwhelming to learn how to use some of the stuff. But just find the most organized person in your chapter and make them responsible for it.
What other questions do we have?
Well, kind of want to bring it back to the original question, the how, because we've talked a lot about the why and the what, but I think the how is very important. How do we get these sponsors is a very important question. We know we can talk to multiple people and things like that, but I think really understanding the essence of building that relationship and what kind of things go into that, I feel like that will be an important thing for us to really understand. Moving forward to be successful, because we want to be efficient and effective at the same time. We don't want to waste time. And we also want to be impactful in building those relationships and those dynamics.
So, in looking at how to do this, I think the biggest piece of advice I can give you is really look at developing relationships and collaboration. Because I think if you go, and I joked that there's people that you can just say, hey, do you want to sponsor? And they say yes. And so you can do that with some of the folks, right? Like, Estelle's nodding. Yeah, there's some people that just want to sponsor. They want to get up in front. Yeah. But I think if you are truly coming from a place of, I like what you do, I want to let more of my colleagues know about what you do, and so I want to talk about how we can work together so that my chapter gets supported, because that's important, that my members get something valuable, but that also you get something, because I think I want to get you some visibility because I love what you do. I want to share the resources you have with my members. I think when you come from the angle of what are they going to get, if you enter that conversation in that way, they're much more responsive than saying, I need $100. Even I need $1,000, I need $500. Like, if you come with the ask of I need money, some people will be like, sure, I get it. Like, yeah, let's just do it. But most people, especially if you're thinking creatively about who could sponsor events, I think coming from a place of, I see you. These therapists are good at this. I see you. I see what you're doing. I like what you're doing. This is that alignment, making sure that you actually want them to be there. And so I really would love to talk with you about how we can collaborate and get you more visible with my membership of this number, because we have this many people who show up in the meetings, and you need to be at that meeting so that people can learn about you. And here's some different ways where you can get visibility at that meeting if you want. I think coming from a place of collaboration. Okay, Charlene also wants to say something.
No, well, so I just wanted to share because we did want this to be a little bit more tactical. I think we got very theoretical the whole time, but on page 3, it talks about sponsorship package. So there's nothing wrong with having your tiers and the sponsorship package and really thinking about what your chapter can offer. We gave some ideas in there just in case you guys are brand new trying to figure out what you want to offer. But I think the important part is not being so rigid with those packages and building in some flexibility. So it's almost like a menu in a sense. So you've got an idea of what you're offering, but then you build out your course with the partner that you're talking to. So they might be able to go through and say, okay, these are the things that are really attractive to us. What are you guys trying to accomplish? How much money do you need? And you can kind of build that out. So I think it's one thing to have sponsorship packages, and we gave you tons of examples, but don't lose that flexibility in the effort to be really streamlined and get it done quickly, because relationships do take a little bit of time, and you don't want it to be just like, here's our package, take it or leave it, because some people might not feel the value in that particular thing. But if you sit there and talk to them, you might find that you can actually, in your eyes, give away less and they feel that they're getting more.
I just wanted to say something really quickly. So in building out packages, one thing that you want to think about is what the value actually is. So if you look at if there's going to be, like a grand sponsor, and this is the big sponsor, they get most visibility, that kind of stuff, you're going to want to see what do each of the individual pieces, what are they actually worth? So if they get a booth, like you have a nice exhibitor place that has a lot of traffic, don't put your exhibitors in the basement. That was awful one time. I was like, really? We're spending tons of money and we're in the basement? Okay, that's a bad practice. But when you have the exhibitors right there, it's interactive, it's like a little party, that kind of stuff. Anyway, but if the exhibitor booth by itself is worth, I know, you guys were there, right? Man, it was awful. Anyway.
Was that LA Camp?
No. This wasn't a chapter. It shall remain unnamed, but it was here. But it was here. That's why I'm so upset. It was here. It was like over there. Okay. Anyway. Anyway, but if the exhibitor booth is worth $600 for something, right? Like if that's what your table is worth, and you give that and like one other thing, and you charge your grand sponsors $2 billion, they're gonna be like, that's not really worth it, because I could just get the exhibitor table for $600, right? Yeah, nobody's gonna sponsor you for $2 billion. But so you wanna make sure that you actually price out the pieces, and then, and it's kind of creating product packages. So if somebody gets an exhibitor booth, they pay $600. But if it's part of their, the next level up, they get something extra, and then it's a little bit less. They can see the value, the monetary value as it goes up. But you want to make sure you actually see what the value is, and if there's a solo mailer or something from the stage, or they're giving a specific kind of 15-minute talk on some content, and you want that to be sponsored, like you want to actually price some of those things out, so people actually, because some folks will be looking to say, okay, I'm going to give you $5,000, what am I actually getting? And you want to make sure that you can actually give them all of those things, because if you don't give those things, I hate to say it, you're in breach of contract. So you want to make sure that you can actually give things, that you've actually looked at stuff, that you're not just using a template from last year and you actually don't really have that many members anymore, or you don't have that mechanism anymore. You want to make sure that you actually look at it. So that's also very tactical of like, if you have packages, make sure you actually price them out and the price makes sense. Some things feel a little bit intangible, like how much should advertising be worth, or how much should an email to your membership be worth, but you want to make sure that it makes sense. Okay, we've got a question there and a question there.
And know your placement, because when we did this open couch, it was our first time, and the room was maybe twice the size. I think you guys were there, weren't you? And each of the booths, basically it was a table this size, it was split in half, and I don't know what Heather was charging for those prices, but most of the booths, everyone had to cram everything into 3 feet. And that's kind of hard, but it was a first time situation. We didn't know how the tables were going to be able to be set up at first. So you also need to know your environment that you're going to be at.
Yeah, you don't want a lot of surprises. Do you want to say something to that?
Yes, and I think to that point, you want to make sure that you're in communication with your sponsors after so that you know what you did well and what you didn't, and you can have that conversation and say, hey, we didn't realize the tables were going to be 3 feet across. That's not cool. You know, did you want to come next year? We'll give you a discount on doing the same thing, whatever. Like you can talk through and actually continue the conversation versus just make it look like, well, yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, feedback's really important. We get feedback a lot of time in our company. We listen to that and we use it, and it helps us make our product better. So you should consider doing the same thing. I'd also say when Anthony asked about the how. So for me, it's like I would get together with my board or my team and just brainstorm stuff. I mean, even something as simple as like if I'm having an event, I'm bringing in a speaker. You could find a local like great restaurant that has like really great healthy food and say, look, I've got this event. I've got a lot of local therapists that like are right around your restaurant. Do you want to come in and maybe provide food and talk about like how your food is so healthy? Because that could tie in a whole self-care discussion. So you could think about that with anything. You could find a tennis instructor to come in and talk about the importance of playing tennis and whatever. I mean, someone might want to do that. You never know. So I would just get together and brainstorm because you never know what could come from it and what kind of sponsorship you can get.
I wanted to piggyback on that. So one of the overarching ideas I try to hold on to is cross-pollination. We aren't necessarily just limited to, and it's also what you were talking about, reaching out to LCSWs. We're not just about our own little niche. I mean, let's build communities. Let's bring in people who aren't necessarily directly connected, but there is overlap and there is mutual interest and benefits, and it makes it diverse, it makes it interesting, it makes it vital and rich. And it's a really good approach to how you reach out into the community.
For sure. Thank you, Estelle. Yeah, we only have a couple more minutes and there's a couple of questions, so we'll see if we can do that here and then back there.
I'm just trying to bottom line this for myself since I'm new to this, and no one's actually saying this, but what I'm hearing is with sponsorship, are we basically having people who have something to offer pay the chapter to advertise for them?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think the message is that there is some truth to that. There is advertising, but I think the word advertising is very limiting. It is about visibility. It's about partnership. It's getting people in front of each other. And so it could be about your members getting in front of a sponsor as well. Yes, there is advertising opportunities. That is one piece. You can have an ad go out in a program. You can have an ad go out to your membership. But I think the biggest piece is that if you see it as that transactional, you pay me and you get to be in front of your member and you get to be in front of my membership, I think that's where you start getting that limitation. And so you want to look at it as, how do we build a relationship? Yes, they're giving us money, so there's that payment. And there's other sponsorships. It could be they're giving us a location, they're giving us food, it can be in-kind sponsorships. But I think what the piece that we're trying to really take home is that if you're seeing it as advertisement, you're probably missing opportunities. Did you want to say more, Charlene?
No, I guess it's just, it should be more than that. It shouldn't be, we've got an ad space and so you're going to pay us for that. It's building that relationship beyond. So it might start there, but it's not being afraid of identifying other opportunities. So I think maybe if we would have kind of talked about some of the different things we've talked about, but, being in a newsletter or being able to speak at an event to offer resources, it shouldn't be a one-to-one, like an advertising. That might be one component. But what we're talking about here, like the way to evolve it is to make it into a relationship where if you guys are doing something and you realize you need a resource, you think through all those partners that you have and you say, oh, so-and-so, they actually offer that resource. So maybe we can talk to them since they helped us with other things and they might be involved in this. So it's not just having a logo and a link and saying, here, you should check out this company. Does that make sense? Or
I'll have to think through it.
Yeah, it's complex. So we have 2 more questions, but we are at time. I want to make sure that we honor that. You probably have another session to get to. Did you guys have quick questions, or do you want to talk offline?
I was just gonna say that I think one thing that's helpful is recognizing if you have sponsorships and you have partnerships coming in, to also sell that when you're looking for other sponsorships or partnerships, and that sometimes you can give the opportunity for those people to link. and sort of not overlook that.
Connections are great. And you
Yeah,
had something?
I just want to show an example of San Diego had. So we used to do these therapist attorney luncheons, and so things kind of fell through. We stopped doing it for a while, and we noticed that our sponsorships, a lot of the law firms were wanting to sponsor us, but a lot of the events we had, it didn't really apply to have a law firm at a lot of events to be sponsorships to speak to our partnership. So what we ended up doing is turning into now we kind of re-collaborate, and we're starting this therapist attorney luncheon with different law firms now. And now we're doing quarterly workshops. And so it's kind of like we kind of took an old partnership and kind of turned it into something different.
Right.
So we're still utilizing that connection and relationship we're having, but just turned it into something different. So it's like, it's all about getting creative and really figuring out, well, I have these people, how can we utilize them in a different way? And also like venues, like you're saying about restaurants and stuff. San Diego, even though we don't get a lot of monetary sponsors, a lot of it's venues. Like we have a yoga, like having a yoga event. And so we take sponsors that are interested and we figure out, okay, how can we spin this into an event that we can utilize? So that's kind of really how.
Yeah, and I think that's something where I think I talked to Kiefer a long time ago, and San Diego has amazing ideas for collaborative sponsorship. So those are definitely folks to talk to as well. So thank you guys so much for being here and participating.